What is up, responsible day traders? Today is Sunday, September 18th, 2022. I am Lindsay Duff, and coming to you from beautiful Bogota, Colombia, this is Responsible Day Trading. So I realize it's a little dark in here. I can't get it much brighter in my room. I have tried to move stuff around, and I wanted a little bit of the mountains in the background, so we're just going to go with it. It has been wonderful, having a great time, really just spending a lot of time between the hotel and the office for you profit trader. Lots of developments, lots of wonderful things, and I'm just happy to be here and be able to help grow our community and help things just move along in the right direction. Speaking of moving along in the right direction, here at Responsible Day Trading, we have started our scholarship program. So we've started looking for our new scholarship students. We're going to have 2 full scholarships and 2 at the startup level. So that's going to be 4 scholarships. We're going to be announcing that towards the end of October. And I'll put a link down below where you can go and start registering yourself so that we can see if you're going to be one of our next scholarship students. All right. So guys, let's go ahead, see what the market's got for us. It's been a little while since I've been here with y'all. Jason took care of it last week. Sorry, my mic's in the picture, but I had to have it close because otherwise it sounded super echoey. All right, let's go ahead, check out that market. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go ahead and head over here to news, and then we're going to look at market news for this week and see what we got. All right, let's look here. Nothing tomorrow for Monday. Tuesday, we've got news pre-market. Wednesday is the big kicker. So we do have news in the morning. So 30 minutes after the market opens, an hour after the market opens, and then we've got FOMC at 1 o'clock. So my suggestion would be, at least 30 minutes before and just wait for it to slow down after, maybe 30 minutes after at the most, to just kind of hang out and watch what happens here. Sometimes those bars spike so big that it really makes it tough to be able to participate safely in that kind of thing. Thursday pre-market, so an hour before the market opens, and then Friday we're going to have Powell speak at 1 o'clock, which can sometimes move the market. So it may make for an interesting week, guys. We may see some stuff kicking around. All right, let's go ahead and check out this market. These bars are really small. It's not my favorite, but it is what it is. Okay, so man, we see what happened. We got back above, we created the head and shoulders, pulled right back into this area and pushed down. We had a really good feeling that it was going to do that because we got back above the EMAs here and never really pulled away from them a second time. What I mean by that is when we pull away here, when we come back, we want to see it pull away and go higher in order to anticipate if we're going to have more action to the upside. Of course, we're going to watch the MACDs when that happens to know if we're going to look for more up or more down at that point. Same thing happened here. We pulled up into the area, went higher, and finally pulled away from the EMAs, but we could not pull away at this point. And the MACDs were very indicative that that was going to push back down, considering it's outside of the Bollinger Bands and still rolling down. Another thing, EMAs remained open to the downside. Lower pivot happening here than this other major lower pivot. Is this a major lower pivot? Yes. It just exceeded it by a little bit. But when we're looking at these major pivots that crossed the top Bollinger Band or crossed the top EMA, then this is definitely that lower pivot. So let's move on to what happened this week. Okay. So it gave a nice big run to the upside, and we're probably thinking, oh man, this is going to continue up. We're going to get back through here. We're going to go up. But last week, that bar dropped so freaking hard, and we'll see it even better when we look at the 28,657. Just a huge, huge spike, and I believe that happened overnight. And when that happened, we barely had any pullback in the MACDs, which was a really good sign that this was going to continue down. So we pulled away from these EMAs again. Now, the MACDs are outside of the Bollinger Bands. They're pushing to the downside. We have both the price and the MACDs leading higher here. So they're kind of saying the same thing, that right now they're leading higher. One of the things I do like about what we see of Friday's activity is this bar closing all the way towards the top. Now, with these MACDs being outside of the Bollinger Bands, we typically see something called a snapback, or what we see right here, where it pulls back into the area when the BBs pull away from the Bollinger Bands. So that may be something that we see happen. Right now, we can see that we are below the EMAs and we are below the zero line, which technically tells us more down. So in the overall currently, we have a downward market. Let's go ahead and look at the 28,657. So, now here is that big bar that I was looking at on the daily chart. Just, man, smashed to the downside. Even though we were having a pretty good run to the upside, we started having those white peaks at the top here, couldn't reach that top Bollinger Band or couldn't exceed that top pivot, and just a huge spike to the downside, which got us back below the EMAs and back below the zero line, which gave us the direction to the downside. Now it does kind of mill around. It has a little bit of a struggle going down. We do pull back into these areas, which is really, really great for pushes to the downside. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now. The direction is still to the downside on the 28,657. Even though we've gotten inside of the EMAs, which technically weakens them, we never cross that top EMA. And that top EMA is important to cross. Push up, and it started to do a snapback right in here. Now, the MACDs are going to want to push down pretty hard, cross the bottom Bollinger Band, and start pushing down here to get us still working in that direction of the downward move. It looks like initially it may be making an attempt to push back up a little bit higher towards that next EMA, simply because this BB that has pulled down here and this price bar that's pulled down, this price bar is pulled down a pretty decent amount. This BB hasn't moved much, so we may see it do something like this. It's a little early. The market's only been open for about 20, almost 30 minutes, so things can definitely change, right? This hard close at the top and the BB pulling away is pretty nice to be able to see this market move back up. So we may see it move back up towards these EMAs and then push down. Right now, our other charts are giving us a little bit of mixed signals. I mean, that happens overnight a lot of times, and it's part of the reason I don't trade overnight. Not only that, it moves like molasses, and that can cause you to make all kinds of decisions that aren't necessarily proper at that time, mainly because of boredom and insecurities. If I'm being very honest with that kind of thing. But we can see it's attempting to close towards the bottom. I mean, this bar is still in its first bar of the day. So out of 28,675 ticks, we've still got quite a bit to go. So we may see this push back through and down into here. Right now, it's showing signs of trying to push back up. But if it breaks through this band and the BBs start breaking to the downside and start breaking through everything and start moving back to the downside like we see in here, even though it broke back above the zero line at these points, it's got to cross that band to tell us that it's really going to push down. It may pull down to that band and settle there, sit on it. Those bands are pretty wide and spread apart, and they're not considered weak. They're considered weak right here because they're not really open like they are here. They're kind of a blob, I guess you could say. And so it doesn't have the same look as we did back here whenever it was crossing that top, that zero line. Now, these BBs are very weak. They're not what we would consider strong. Strong is something more like this with a lot of separation between the BBs. These are very, very weak. They're close together. They're struggling to really, really push higher. If they look like this, I could be like, man, we are pushing up more. But right now, it's struggling to do that a little bit, so we may see it come back down. Let's go ahead. I haven't actually really looked at these other charts. Okay. If we look at the 10,946, what has happened here? And let's go ahead and just pull out our trusty lines. So here's where we pulled away from the EMA for the first time. Here's where we started to pull away and we made a higher pivot than the previous time. So what we see is what I was talking about on the daily chart, pulling away and then pulling away and making a higher pivot. But what happens when we make that higher pivot in the MACDs is the MACDs are leading lower. Now, when that happens, and especially when that happens in bigger areas that have the EMAs close by, that's a pretty good sign of a push down. Well, I kind of want to believe this is going to push up, and maybe that's, I know with us what we do, we can trade whether the market's going up or down, but we still would like to see it moving in a positive direction for, the economy's sake. And right now, I'm struggling just a little bit to see that. And let's also talk about what's happening here on the 10-946, which may put us in a little bit of a questionable situation. Okay, so we did have the divergence, and the divergence has technically done its job. When I say done its job, we're looking for it to pull it back down to the EMAs. Boom, right to it, like a glove. Now, the next question is, do we expect it to continue pushing through that area? Or are we going to see it sit at this area and push to the upside as these EMAs are working pretty hard to cross to the upside? Now, we can see a lot of distance in this BB. Okay, what do I mean by a lot of distance? From the previous BB, there is a lot of distance down. Now, we may see that because this bar was so big, it had a little bit of a gap here. We know when we have a gap, a lot of times it will close. So this is a little bit of a smaller gap. It is pulled right into the area. We still have about half of this bar left to close out. So we may see this BB weaken and pull back in closer towards this other BB. Now, just as what I was talking about on the 28657, we want to see this BB cross this bottom Bollinger Band, and we want to see it do it with some conviction. Like maybe not be the only BB. Maybe see this cross and then another cross, and you can see these Bollinger Bands rolling over and starting to open up to the downside. And that will let us know that we're really looking for it to push back down. Now, how far would we ask? Well, if we really want to see it do something that tells us that it's going to push down, we're going to start making moves not only to the zero line, but through the zero line, getting back below the zero line, creating movement below there to really see that downward movement. So currently for right now, on our 10-946, the direction had moved to the upside, but it is making the attempt to move it down. As I said, we want to see it cross that bottom Bollinger Band. Just like here, it couldn't cross the bottom Bollinger Band, pulled down, made the reversal bar, and pushed back up. So, what we do here at Responsible Day Trading, and as traders who are really looking and making the decision as things happen, what's happening now may change very, very soon. So we always have to stay in the know. We have to stay in the now. And we cannot put our opinions on this. So if we think it should go down and we try and make it move down ourselves by pushing the market or by trying to take our little, 8, 10, whatever, 2 contracts down, we're not going to move that market anywhere, guys. So let's move on over to the 1597. So over here at the 1597, technically the direction is still up. And why so? Why is the direction still up? We've gotten back below the zero line somewhat here, right? We do have a lot of strength and momentum pushing to the downside. There is a lot of open space in these BBs. We see that a lot overnight. So we just need to be aware of that. We've pulled down to these EMAs, but we haven't pulled away from them. And what I mean by pull away from them, I'm going to explain this again. And we see a really, really good example of it right here. We got back below the EMAs and we got below the zero line significantly, but we could never pull away and make a lower pivot like we saw here, the higher pivot. So the direction remained to the upside here. And as we pulled back into the areas, it gave us great areas to take trades and to move along with the market. So here we are sitting at the EMAs. And here we are pushing below the zero line. The anticipations is for this to try and push back down. But we need to see it really pull away from the EMAs, pull back towards it, and pull away again. Now, that takes a lot of time and patience at times, especially in after hours markets like we're seeing here. So we want to be aware that we're not trying to make it go in that direction. Now, if I look at the 233, direction has moved to the downside. We pulled away here again and made a lower pivot. We haven't even crossed that top Bollinger Band now. So it does look like it's still making an attempt to push down just a little bit longer. I'd be really, really interested in seeing what this next BB is going to present right here when the next bar starts to show itself. So in 185 ticks. But as it's pulled into an area, these are areas that kind of stop the market. These are areas that traders are looking for. So looking as it pulls into that area, there are people saying, ooh, we're in this area, got a great place to have my risk. Let's try and take this to the upside. While you have other people who were taking the short from up here. In theory, I say in theory because there was such a big drop, we could never have anticipated this strong BB to just all of a sudden move to the downside. You know why this is still working? I wanted to talk about something that's going on right in here and where I see a lot of traders kind of make an early move, anticipating things to go up. They'll start to see some reversal bars right here, and they're not seeing a strong rollover. So they may start trying to take the trade from this point to the upside. The problem with doing something like that, even though the BBs look like they are going to push back up at this moment, the problem with doing that is being a little bit ahead. This is the 233 tick chart. We have 196 ticks left of it. A lot can change. So this is where the tick counter is very important to us. So a lot can change in that 191 ticks, and it can start pushing to the downside pretty quickly. This is also why we don't trade in things like FOMC, because that countdown happens so fast. It could be the blink of an eye for 5 bars. So we just want to stay safe, stay considerate, and be very selective in what we're doing when we trade. So the reason that I would ignore this potential push to the upside is right here. This is so much distance and strength to the downside. No way are you going to catch me trying to take along. And so a lot of people will get really, really caught up in that small momentum and see this and think, oh my gosh, I need to be in, I'm out, I'm late, or I'm not in time. And they'll take something like this. The risk really in a position like this where the BBs haven't broken to the upside just yet should be back here. Now that is at 38.84. Currently we're at 38.88, which would mean 4 points in risk in order to take this long trade. I'm not willing to do that kind of thing. Now, can I put it right here behind here? Yeah, I could. And I could take that risk of hoping that it at least pushes up towards the EMA before if it's going to push back down. To me, that's not worth it. What I want to do is I want to see everything really in tune for that direction. So I want to see this at least starting to slow and roll. I don't see that right now. We waited for that next BB. It showed up. It's still separating and has some distance. Now we are above that last pivot to the downside, but not really totally confident in it. We do see that right now this bar is attempting to move back up. We still have 4,000 ticks here, but we still have some strength to the downside. We haven't crossed that bottom Bollinger Band, so this may push back up. I can see it really, really working to move back up there and really trying to break above that top Bollinger Band. So now it's starting to show me like, hey, we may break through here. Here's the next problem. First place that may create a bounce to the downside right up in here. These EMAs, this EMA right here. So I'm not going to chance it to take the long. I mean, did I see it? Yeah, I saw the opportunity for it. But I'm going to hold off on that because I want to make sure that I have my risk in a good place and that I'm feeling really comfortable with the amount of area I have to run to that next direction or to that next area of resistance. So if this does push back up and this rolls back up here, it's going to have a little bit of work to do to come up, equal this pivot, exceed it, so we no longer have divergence happening between these pivots. We do see now, look, we can see it slowing down just a little bit. BB's starting to pull together, and we may see that as it pulls back into this area. But I'm going to want to see the real oomph to push up through there, because even looking through here, we do still have some divergence, and even probably back through this pivot, we had some divergence. Yeah. The MACDs are leading higher consistently. And I know we have some lower pivots in here. That does happen, but I'm definitely looking at these highs. It's leading lower and lower and lower as the price was really working its way back up higher. So it was giving us some signals and some signs there too. Just as I would do any day of the week that I'm trading, I wanted to prove it to me. Right now, this is a little messy, guys. I mean, look at these bars, the way they just pull back and forth and back and forth. It makes it very hard to trade. And there is no shame in sitting out and waiting for things to work themselves out. Sometimes that may mean waiting a couple of days, and there is so much discipline in being patient and waiting. And there's so much value in it that I'm willing to do it so I can make sure I feel comfortable with each and every trade that I take. So, here's exactly what I was talking about, pulling right up into that area. Now, could it push back up off of here? Sure, absolutely. The market's going to do a lot of things that we can't predict. What we're doing here is we're looking at the best opportunity, the best possibilities in order to continue with the movements. So we do have MACDs outside of the Bollinger Bands, but still below the zero line. So the direction on our 233 is still down, okay? So the very extreme immediate is still down. So, we may see this pull back in, mill around with these long bars right in here. While this has slowed down just a little bit, it's not enough for me to say, yes, I'm ready to take the long trade now. So we see it pulled right back, touched these areas, and what's happening? We're seeing it trying to make the attempt to push back down. So it's something that you always want to pay attention to. Do I have room to run to my next area to take the trade? If I don't, then I'm going to wait. And there was definitely not enough room to run up to this area to feel really comfortable and safe in taking the trade. So, and if I had taken the trade, as soon as it started to bleak in the opposite direction, as soon as this bar started to push itself to the downside, I'm out of that sucker, right? Because there's no reason to lose more and more on that whenever we knew that it could possibly bounce down from this area. All right, guys. So that is going to wrap it up. I hope that everybody has a wonderful week. I've got another week and a half here in Bogota. So next Sunday, we'll be right here in this spot again as well. Doing our weekly rundown. Guys, be sure and check out the scholarship. Share it with your friends if you think it's something that they might need to have in their pocket, or maybe that's something that they might want to apply for. We would love to have you there. We do this because we love people. We love traders. We want to help. And there's no better way than giving an education that can change your entire life. So, all right. I hope that everybody has a fantastic week. And as always, that I look forward to catching you on the profitable side.